Okay.
Okay. 10 seconds.
Good morning and welcome to today's 20-minute update, BCF's monthly series of live streams to give you an inside look at BCF, our initiatives, the work we do in Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and the entire region. Thanks for joining us this morning. My name is Andrew Waldman with BCF, and joining me today is Margaret Williams, Executive Director of Maryland Family Network. Margaret is also a member of the Maryland Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education, which is also known as the Kirwan Commission. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Nice to be here.
Thanks for coming. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to thank BCF's civic leadership donors for their support. It's because of you that we are able to do the 20-minute update, so thank you. Okay, today we're talking about early care and early childhood education. We have an expert here. So as we get started, I just wanted to ask Margaret, can you kind of define what early childhood education is? What does that mean when you say it?
To me, early care and education, early childhood education, early childhood care and education means the care that adults give to children from birth to roughly 5 when they enter kindergarten, which is mandatory at age 5 for Maryland children. So everybody before the required kindergarten.
And how important is that 0 to 5, caring for a child during that 0 to 5 period in their life?
Yeah, so the first, what we like to say is the first 5 years last forever. And that's because in those early years, the brain is developing. And the facts are that in the first 5 years, by age 5, 90% of the brain is fully developed. So what children are born with a startle reflex and a swallow reflex and some very basic rudimentary abilities. But all the rest in those early years is actually building the brain. And probably the most important part of that is attachment. We human beings are social animals. I look into your eyes and there is a chemical reaction in your brain that actually uses the pathways that are in your brain, all of which developed in those first 5 years. So it builds the foundation. The brain development in the early years builds the foundation for everything that comes later, either a sturdy and strong, healthy foundation or a weak, fragile one.
So how do we build that foundation then?
It's up to adults to do that well, parents and primary caregivers, and the other group of people that we're most interested in are child care providers, family care providers, and child care centers, Head Start, early Head Start providers, but families primarily, and we work, what's important is to make sure families and providers have the skills, techniques, equipment to do the job well with children.
Can you characterize how you teach or other early care providers teach those skills to parents?
Well, there are a number of ways adults learn about how to care for children. There's, of course, classes, just sort of the didactic lessons of
Sure.
parenting. So you can find parenting classes around town and take those for children at age-appropriate intervals. That you can interact, if you have your child in the child care program, you can see the experts interacting with your children, and you can learn by watching people who have been trained to help children develop and copy what they're doing. You can learn from other parents and from pediatricians and take courses yourself at 2- and 4-year universities. So adults can learn how to take care of children in a number of ways.
Great. I just want to pause real quick. I'm being told that we're having a couple technical difficulties with our live stream. So if you're able to hear what I'm saying, we will also have this call available after the fact on bcf.org/20-minute update. But stand by if you're still having technical difficulties. We're working on that right now. Okay. So I wanted to, we talked a little bit about the individual, the family unit. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about the benefits of good, solid early childhood education, how that affects economics, society. What is the bigger picture?
Sure. So, first of all, let's focus on the child, him or herself, and the benefits to children. Children who get a good start in life tend to do well throughout their lives. So what the research shows is that high quality early care and education in those first 5 years is correlated with on-time graduation, success in the job market, success in long-term relationships and raising a family, and avoiding some negative things, which include adolescent pregnancy, long-term special education needs that haven't been attended to, involvement in the juvenile justice and adult correction system. Poor health outcomes are correlated with, a weak foundation in the early years. So what we know is that children grow up to be adults who do better if there's a strong, people may not think that those first 5 years have a direct impact on the later years, but they do. And we know that because our Nobel laureate in economics, James Heckman, has shown that the greatest return on investment of public dollars is in early care and education. For every dollar spent, roughly $7 is returned. So is saved. And that's a combination of both contributing adults who buy houses, pay taxes, buy insurance, and contribute to the economy, and by those avoiding the negative outcomes that are costly to society. We also know that a strong early childhood system saves employers money. It saves the economy. It returns taxes so that there's an economic benefit apart from the family and the child to employers. And we recently, Maryland Family Network, did a report called Counting Our Losses that shows one of those startling numbers in there is that because of our weak child care and early childhood system altogether, parents are late to work because of child care problems.
Yep.
They have to leave work early. They may have to take a day off because the child care program closes when the employer is open. They may have to drop out of the workforce altogether because of child care problems. They step down from full-time to part-time. They fail to take an opportunity to move from part-time to full-time, all because of child care. That's cost employers about $2.4 billion in lost productivity, in replacement costs, and so forth. We also know that parents delay advancing their own education because of child care problems, and that has a very large cost. That's $2.3 billion.
Is that just in Maryland?
Yes, that's all in Maryland, and
wow.
we did a survey. We hired a survey company who called on landlines and cell phones, had to get the 300 families we needed. These are all families of children 5 and under who had been working in the last year. And we asked them, because of child care difficulties, did you have any of the issues that I mentioned to you? And so we were surveying Maryland families of children 5 and under who had been working or are working. So that's our informant group, and it's quite startling what the impact is on our economy of a system that doesn't really meet the needs of families and children.
That kind of segues into my next question, which is, if this is also important, what is Maryland doing to address this issue right now?
So Maryland has come quite a long way, relatively recently, about addressing these early years and doing something about them. Let's just say, compared to other states, we have always done a wonderful job in terms of regulations of health and safety issues in early care and education spaces outside the home. So we've always been one of the top 10 states in that regard. We are one of the few states that adds funding to Head Start and Early Head Start. These are the poorest children at or below the federal poverty level, so that they can have a full day, a full year experience. Our public pre-K gets high marks, there's a National Institute for the Early Education and Research, NEAR it's called, who studies pre-K programs. These are programs for 4-year-olds. Completely in Maryland, we serve children, it is mandated that school systems offer at least a half-day program for 4-year-olds who are at or below 185% of poverty.
Okay.
That's about $30,000 for a family of 3.
Hmm.
So in that regard, we are sort of in the middle of the pack in terms of our accessibility. There are states that have universal pre-K. So we're not doing great, but we're not at the bottom. We are near the bottom, or we have been near the bottom, in our child care subsidy program, which is extra funding for the working poor, so that families can afford to go to work and pay to have their children in a quality early learning environment. Our problem has been, right up until this General Assembly session, that our reimbursement rates for the child care subsidy program have afforded low-income parents access to less than 10% of the child care available, which means if they use the subsidy, they are only able to access what is the cheapest and, one could argue, the poorest quality child care there is. Piece of legislation that went through the session this year requires the state starting this past July and continuing for several years. We are ramping up to allowing parents at least 60% of the market rate, and then we can never fall below that, the 60th percentile, I should say. So we've made a lot of strides there. We estimate in the child care subsidy domain, one of the top 10 states with that rule. We also, here the General Assembly and Governor Hogan can take some credit for raising the eligibility rate. We've almost doubled the eligibility. I told you it was up to $30,000 for a family of 3. It's now roughly $71,000.
Oh, that's good.
And then you're eligible. That's for 71 is a family of 4. So we've increased the eligibility rate for the child care subsidy. We've increased the subsidy amount. That's really moved us out of the rock bottom where we were and set us on a road to the top. I think the Kirwan Commission, if I may bring that in at the moment.
I was about to ask you about that, yes.
Okay, good. So the Kirwan Commission is envisioning, the commission is broken down into several working groups, 4 working groups, and one of the working groups is early childhood. And that work group has a set of recommendations that has not yet been voted on by the full commission. So we're not at the end of this process yet. But that work group is recommending several things that will really improve our early care and education offerings. One, they are proposing pre-K free for everybody from 0 to 300% of poverty, and then from 300% of poverty to 600% of poverty, pre-K on a sliding scale. That means everybody up to about $150,000 for a family of four will be entitled to public pre-K at no cost or some cost. For 3-year-olds, for low-income 3-year-olds, and these are 3-year-olds at or below 300% of poverty, they will be eligible for an early education experience paid for by the state. And what's wonderful about Maryland's system for both 3s and 4s is we're not just talking about space in elementary schools, but parents can choose to put their children in family child care or center-based child care in their communities as long as that care meets state standards for pre-K, high quality, in other words.
That's great.
So that's coming along. A third item on the agenda is sort of special services in high needs areas. The Baltimore Community Foundation undoubtedly is familiar with Judy Centers. So Kerwin Work Group on Early Childhood Education is recommending expansion of the Judy Center model. And for pregnant women and for young parents of children birth through 3, family support centers, which is a wonderful program, a 2-generation program where parents and children come together. The state is the Kerwin Work Group is recommending expanding the network of those programs throughout the state.
That's great. I want to pause real quickly and just ask anyone in the audience if they have a question. If you're on the phone right now, if you have a question, you can hit *6 to unmute your line and ask the question. Once again, you just hit *6 on your keypad and then ask the question. Once you're done, hit *6 to go back. Anyone on the phone have a question? Okay. I also just got a question here from somebody on Facebook. And the question is...
No, it's a technical problem.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on one sec. This is actually a reminder from our producer that we want to apologize for the interruption, but there's some technical difficulties going on, and if you go to Facebook, you can make a comment there and continue the current discussion.
What's going on is
Oh.
The original feed got cut off because
Oh.
of the internet just went out, and so it ended the first feed. So in order to see the continuation of this discussion, they need to go back to our Facebook and refresh, and then they can continue this discussion.
Got it.
Right?
Thank you, Mike. Okay, we have a couple more questions to get to. I'm not seeing any questions on Facebook right at the moment. So, okay, let's get back into it. So, you told us a little bit about the Kerwin recommendations. I wondered who you look to for sort of the model for those recommendations related to the pre-K and early childhood education recommendations. What states,
Couple of answers to this. I think the first real exposure to the power of early care and education, the importance of it for the commission as a whole, was from a woman named Sharon Lynn Kagan, who is an expert in this field and has a dual appointment at Columbia and Yale. And she gave us a wonderful talk. Her PowerPoint is online at the Kerwin Commission site, so anybody can see it and see her, I think she had a written report as well. It was very moving and packed full of the evidence base for investments in early care and education. We also have one of the 2 big consulting firms, APA, to the commission, Auchenblick, Palink and Associates, did an analysis of pre-K for 3s and 4-year-olds. And that's in a large book that was distributed in January of 2016, and that also is available online. That also references research and other states. We also have the report from the other major consultant, the National Center on Education and the Economy, NCEE, who studied the highest performing education systems in the world. The United States is not one of them. Of the 60 or so industrialized nations that are part of the analysis that's done periodically, we're about in the middle of the pack again. The high performers that we compared ourselves against, these aren't all countries, but they were chosen because they're about the size of Maryland, were Shanghai, Singapore, Ontario, and Finland. And we looked at what they were doing against what we're doing to try to figure out how we reposition ourselves to have as wonderful outcomes as they have. And what we took note of and what those consultants made very clear to all of us is those education systems provide families with a very strong start for their children, with universal health care, universal paid parental leave, high quality child care paid for by the state before children come to school, which is usually age 5 or 6. So the children in these states, in these comparison places, generally come to school fully ready to learn and on an equal playing field with each other, regardless of their background, their ethnic or economic background. So we know that it works from those countries. We also looked at New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and New Jersey, who have relatively robust early ed systems. Actually, ours might be, once we get Kirwan on its way. Kirwan's recommendations right now are projected to take place over a 10-year period. Once we're underway, we probably will exceed what those states are doing in early care and education. So it's an exciting time for us. But that's our evidence base, and there's lots online to read about it.
And I'm going to make sure after this call to post on our Facebook page the link to the Kirwan Commission website. Do you have the survey that Maryland Family Network did?
I do. It's called Counting Our Losses.
Okay.
The high cost of an inadequate child care system in Maryland. And you can get it on our website. I'd be glad to give you the link so you can put it on yours.
I will definitely do that. Okay, so we're actually just a couple minutes over our 20-minute limit here, so I'm going to wrap this up. I want to thank everyone who joined us on the call and on the live stream today, and thank you, Margaret, for coming in and doing this. We really appreciate it. We had a very illuminating discussion. So,
my joy.
Once again, thanks to our civic leadership donors for their support of the call. We'll be back next month for our next 20-minute update. Have a great day.